Speaking oftentimes feel like a tall task, and when giving their IELTS speaking answers, people oftentimes tend to run out of steam. I would say that it's not a mountain that cannot be climbed, but it definitely needs a little bit of hard work. My name is Saad, and here at IELTS Icons, we enable you to get the desired band that you're looking for. Starting off with, we're going to talk about your cue card question. Essentially, it's your question number 2, and you have around 2 minutes to speak for it, and you're given about a minute to prepare for your answer. So I would say that when you're about to give your answer, people oftentimes think that it is not structured, or you do not need to have any structure while giving this answer. I would say that's a very huge misconception, and you definitely need a lot of structure when talking about your cue cards. So you'd be given a question, for example, talk about a memorable journey that you had, and there you'd be given when did you have that journey, what were you feeling towards that journey, and what are the major places that you visited. So the idea is that if you don't go in with a certain structure, you wouldn't be able to answer it, and there's a likely chance that you'll run out of steam after speaking for like a minute. So the best answers typically tend to fulfill the time requirements. They go to close to about 2 minutes, and afterwards that answer is considered a good answer. As for the kind of things that you'd be judged on, you need to have a good lexical resource, your vocabulary. You need to have good grammar and accuracy. You need to have good pronunciation, and your answer needs to be coherent, and they need to have cohesion in them. But regardless of how they checked, the idea is that you need to be prepared enough for you to be able to speak for at least 2 minutes. So starting off with, how do you start the answer? This is just a brief overview. If you want to have a complete understanding and you want more detailed lectures, I'd suggest that you visit our campus at MURREE Road, Rawalpindi, IELTS Icon. It is right next to RABI Center. So talking about what do we do while attempting our speaking task in IELTS speaking exam, cue card question. So you start off with setting a scene. You need to understand this. Everything has an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. And similarly, this question is no different. So the way I like to phrase it is that you start with gear up, then you stream, and then you reflect on your answer. And that's pretty much the best structure that you can have. So start off with setting up a scene. Create an image in your mind, right? Create an image. I would say create a concluding image of what you want to go towards while talking about your answer, right? So the way it would go is, take the question that we were talking about. Talk about a memorable journey, right? So when talking about a memorable journey, you can certainly come up with an image of it, right? With an image of it, or at least a concluding image of what it culminated to, or the way you went, a scene of it, right? So you could essentially start talking about that you went to this place, how the place was, and all of those ideas, or at least set a scene for someone. What I'm trying to say is that your first paragraph, remember, these paragraphs are just in your head. So in your first paragraph, you're essentially letting your examiner or anybody that you're talking to, you're letting them know about the idea itself of what you're going to talk about, right? It isn't anything that's too detailed or not something that you need to be worried about too much. You need to have a natural tone when you're talking, right? So set up a scene. Typically, people on a very low level would start this off like, in 2019, I went on a tour to France. They could do it that way. I would say a better idea is that a really memorable journey that I remember is my visit to the French countryside a couple of years back. And I feel like it is something that that has a higher place in my heart than probably any other journey that I had. See how you've kind of set up the scene for people. You are gearing them up for what you're going to talk about, and kind of see how this is creating an image for them, and you also have an image in your head that you can lead them towards, right? The idea is, now you've talked about your visit to the French countryside, now you can talk about how you got there in the first place. So that first paragraph is essentially setting up a scene, right? It's pretty much like a trailer to a movie. It's also like when you shoot a film, essentially the setting needs to be there. If the setting isn't there, the idea isn't going to be communicated well. No scene is set without a setting. So in your second paragraph, right? So now create micro stories within a story. This is your body paragraph. So typically what I have is that I recommend people to have at least 2 body paragraphs. So remember, these body paragraphs are just in your head. You're just going with the flow. And the idea that giving you the bullet points of what to do, when to do, why to do, you could first of all summarize all of it in how it happened, right? And remember, those bullet points aren't there for you to give a robotic answer. They are there as a blessing. Now you have an idea of what you want to say in your answer. Don't robotically cross off one thing after another. So first you answer what you did, then you answer when you did, then you answer why you did. That'd be a very robotic answer, and that would not give you a very good band. To get a good band, integrate all these elements within a story. Provide a narrative where you kind of tackling with all of these questions, right? So what I would recommend is that you kind of create micro stories where you're crossing off those micro stories one by one. So you start off with, so a anxiety-inducing memory that I still have of that visit is spending a whole evening at the museum. And it was my first experience at a museum, and looking at the scale of it, all the wonderful things that were there, I was not only astonished, to an extent I was overwhelmed. And the fact that I got to see Mona Lisa for the first time, it was quite funny to me, because I imagined it to be a lot bigger. But that's the kind of things life throws at you. Sometimes you expect one thing to be one way, and it turns out to be a very different thing than what you expected. So I would suggest that is the kind of thing that you do. That's our first body paragraph, right? And you create another body paragraph that would essentially work on the same principle. Remember how I talked about so many of the things that were not just talking about the sequence of events. I talked about what I felt at the museum, what I saw at the museum, the kind of things that there were at the museum. So the idea is that it's a coherent narrative. It is not a robotic thing where I'm kind of talking about what I did, then I'm crossing off when I did it, and then why I did it. I'm not doing it like that. I'm kind of giving a very coherent narrative. And the second paragraph could also be something along the lines of that we went to a swimming pool, that we went to a market, that we went somewhere. The idea is that you've got 2 minutes. And a good structure that I've come to understand that takes you to about 2 minutes is that you have that first paragraph where you're setting off the scene, then you create your 2 body paragraphs, and then at the final end of it, you kind of create a reflection of things. So the way I would go about it is that now that I think about it, it was one of the most memorable experiences that I've had in my life. This was one of the first trips that I'd planned, and it gave me a feeling of competence. It gave me a feeling of freedom. And even to this day, when I think of it, it gives me a lot of nostalgia. And the fact that this was my first trip, it happens to be one of the most memorable as well. So notice how now I'm talking about those lingering feelings. The idea is that any experience that you have essentially has some sort of a feeling attached to it. So those feelings are something that stay for the rest of your life. For some, things could be better. For some, it could be sweet. The idea is that now in your final paragraph, you're to sort of conclude it all by talking about those lingering feelings, right? And this is what I suggest that your second question, your cue card question, should be structured as. And with that, I hope that you people learn something out of it. If you want more, please visit our campus at Murree Road, Rawalpindi, and I wish you all the best of luck in your future exams. Thank you very much, and make sure to subscribe and like our videos.